Thank you for coming to Caravan to Nord up here in Grand Marais at the beautiful 4-H building at the Cook Community Center. And a beautiful fall day. My name is Stanley. I'm Executive Director of the Minnesota Music Coalition, which presents this traveling showcase of Minnesota music. And this is our first workshop on our first stop of the this year's Caravan. And we're excited to be here in Grand Marais. And this first workshop, we're going to talk about, we're going to be on the North Shore, so about booking and performing beyond this region, the Twin Cities or else regionally. And with that, I should also say that I'm also a musician. I've been with another banjo, and I've toured around quite a bit in the region, but also on the East Coast and a few other places. So that's what I'm bringing to this particular panel, and of course being someone who presents music as well.
Love it. I'm Emma Dieter. I'm based out of Duluth, Minnesota, and I've had the fortune to work with both of these kind creatures to me, which is great. I work for 3 different entities, I would say. I used to work with Duluth Public Radio, Aston Mike. KFAI 103.3, so that's kind of where I got my musical start in a lot of ways. I grew up in that station. And then branched off to start a position at the Glensheen Mansion in Minnesota. And I curate our summer concert series, Concerts on the Pier, as well as Glensheen Unplugged, which is an intimate living room-esque showcase of Minnesota music.
Really fun bits.
So good. So enchanting and really magical, and a great way to showcase Minnesota music within Minnesota's mansion, and to see all of that come to fruition in one historical location. Then on the side, I get to work with Ellen as a Northern Minnesota representative of the Minnesota Music Coalition. I serve on their communications committee, so we meet up and we talk about how to spread the good word of this coalition across the Northland. Because it's an area that I think you always have had a bit of a presence in, but now are really investing more time and energy into that. That's why we're kicking off the series here. So I'm going to do that, and then on the side I also work with 3 other ladies to curate soundscapes under the name Superior Siren. And
There we go.
There you go.
So are you related to or connected to Jason Baumgart?
Jason is Laura's sister's boyfriend.
Yes. Okay. Yes. Laura's sister.
There is a relation there. Yes, indeed. He's booked us here in Grand Marais, actually, at Voyager Group.
And we were supposed to play together with you guys once, and I think something didn't work at the last minute on your end, but we were so excited that you were coming.
Cool. At the brewery?
At the brewery. I think it was at the brewery.
Yeah. We tried to make it back.
What if let's do something like this?
Thank you so much. We just got the test pressing of our record in yesterday.
About time.
Very nice.
Waiting on this thing.
I know.
It's Superior Siren.
Superior
Is the
Siren.
name of the band.
That was just a word that I tend to use a lot.
Yeah, and Superior Sirens played in the cities and beyond, in addition to playing around this region.
That's true.
So that's our experience.
Yeah.
My name is Mike Novitzki. I also live in Duluth. I used to work at KUOB with Emma. That was about, I think, between being in college and volunteering to actually having a job there. It was about seven and a half years or something. Got to know a lot of local and touring musicians that way. I now work for Minnesota Public Radio for the Current, based in Duluth. The Current has not been in Duluth very long, about a year and a half. For February of 2016 they came. So, and they launched on a signal that was like this really weak, like 90.9. It was like this really weak translator, and it was kind of patchy. So they recently launched 2 new frequencies with KZIO, 2 arbors, and now it's a strong signal. You can hear the Current. Until you get just past Split Rock Lighthouse as you're driving up the shore. But I was hearing it while I was on Madeline Island a couple of weeks ago on the 104.3. So I was like, so the rest of the Current staff, when I went down there with the water. And when I went down there for the staff meeting and told them Madeline Island, they all went, oh, I was just like, oh, you hear that? I got really excited. So I host the Duluth Local Show, which is a 1-hour program. It's Sunday nights at 8 p.m. It features mostly Duluth music. Whatever's topical, who has a show, who's got a new album coming out. I've recently started incorporating a segment of that show called the guest list, because otherwise, it's easy if it's once a week you kind of start playing the same stuff, and so I'm like, well, how can we get people out to shows for musicians who might not be from the area, who happen to be coming through Duluth, because promotion is difficult sometimes. So even though it's the Duluth local show and it does air on the local current stream, which is a side stream that's 24/7 Minnesota music, I'm still like, well, we're going to take 15-20 minutes and play some music from who's ever coming through town from this place or that place.
Dig it.
The guest
Nice.
list.
That's
Yeah,
great.
yeah, and it's always like it's nice to get to dig into some otherwise new music. So that's what I do now. I also am a bartender, and I worked at the Vickers Brew House for 5 years up until last summer of 2016, and there was a time where there was music in that place 6 nights a week. It was almost every single day besides Sunday. That somebody was performing. That's no longer the case, but it was for a long time. And I work at the Red Herring Lounge now, which is another music venue, and we have music generally Wednesday through Saturday. All genres. Nothing is taboo. It's not it's not like a jazz lounge or this. It's like whatever, hip hop, metal sometimes, folk, indie, whatever. And so I've not being a musician myself, and not ever having really put my money where my mouth is when it comes to like touring and like putting yourself on blast for the public. I think I have like a sort of a different perspective on that, having seen so many people come through these places that I work in. People who have been doing it for a long time, people who are new to it, people who may have expectations that are a little bit out of place versus people that have like a better, more open attitude. So just having met so many of them in so many different genres, I'm excited to talk a little bit about that.
So what do you guys want to learn, since you're both musicians? Is there anything particular you've been wanting to know about touring beyond this region, either on the booking end or promotion?
I would love to just hear anything you have to share about booking and promotion, and kind of what we've done a little work in Duluth and on the South Shore, played once in Minneapolis, talking to Red Herring, but the dates are not lining up. So we kind of have some capacity but aren't there yet, and then we get really spoiled here in Grand Marais because there's a phenomenal music scene and we get paid for it, and then we walk home 2 blocks, and it's awesome. And so sometimes we have to step back and say, oh, this is, like, we're lucky that we get to fit this into our weird little farmer in Minnesota.
Yeah.
Clients,
Yeah, because the pay thing is, it's very different in different places, and then you have to travel, and so there's extra expense.
Yeah, I've got a few things on that. It
Yeah.
seems, the people I talk to about it, it's very clear that the landscape for that has changed so drastically. I guess it's always changing, but it just seems so different now when it comes to, well, what is the best way to get out there? Is it, do you hop in a van and go on tour? And I see how tough it is. I hate to come at it from that perspective, but a lot of times what I see with touring is I see people looking really sort of beaten down by the road sometimes, or disappointed when they didn't get the crowd they wanted, or they didn't necessarily get the money that they wanted. So it's, I hate to talk about it from the perspective of the problems that I see, but that's, if you can fix that, or you can know what to expect, I think that's a good place to start.
Yeah.
And so, for one, promotion. Whose responsibility is that necessarily? You know what I mean? Does it fall on you as the musician? Does it fall on the owner of the venue or the booking agent? Obviously you're both probably supposed to be doing a little bit of it. But it's postering, social media. Has postering kind of jumped the shark? There are cheap ways of doing it. Are you just bombarding people with content all the time? I had an interview yesterday with a guy named Damian Gerardo, who is a touring artist out of Seattle. He was on Sub Pop back in the 90s, and he was on Secretly Canadian now for the last 15 years. But I said, I'm going to host this workshop tomorrow, and what should I talk about with touring? He said, well, with touring, the best thing I can tell people is stay where you're at. Because, like what you were saying about being here in Grand Marais, you have these audiences and people who want to see you and like actually getting paid for it. Says a lot of people fall into this mentality that like, well, because it's going so well here, we could go elsewhere and do this, and that's like not always the case, So I think starting slow and cultivating that audience are two things that guy who's been doing it for 21 years seemed to think was, pretty valuable information.
Yeah, and you also brought up a really good point of having a tight-knit community that supports you and having a great experimental space for that. And I found that with Duluth too. Welcome!
Meet Dungan from Treasure.
Hey, Emma.
Emma and Mike from the current.
Nice to meet you as well.
And we just got started talking a little bit ago about performing and also sort of for these musicians who are looking to play beyond the North Shore, some of the things that he was just on that promotion. And sorry, I didn't mean to.
No, that's okay.
It's all good. Mike's wrapping it up.
Yeah, so what I was going to say is one thing that you were asking about in terms of, like, we were starting to set shows in Duluth and the cities, and come on in. Hi. Have a seat.
Hey, hi, Michelle. How are you?
And we're kind of just getting started in a way, so.
We talked to
Are you Emma?
Yeah.
Oh, hi.
And I'm Mike. You guys are going to stop by
Oh,
next
you're right. Hi. Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Okay, well, cool.
So have a
I'm
seat.
glad that we were
Sure.
able to make it.
There's donuts and
We
coffee.
came from Alexandria.
Yeah, so there's donuts and coffee in the back, and feel free to sign in.
Thank you. You guys are probably stuck in traffic right behind you.
Yeah, probably.
Oh, yeah.
Oh my gosh, crazy. So we were just starting to talk about, again, in Grand Marais, a lot of folks are pretty lucky because there's a lot of good paying gigs and they're really local and trying to expand beyond that. And Mike was talking about sort of promotion and sharing those duties with the venue. But certainly one thing that I've found from my perspective, being someone who's, only in the last few years really started touring regionally, and I'm based in the cities, is that a great way to get that thing going, because you're like, well, where do I go and when do I invest the money to go somewhere, is my connections with other musicians have really been the number one way that I've had successful gigs out of town. So coming to things like Caravan is great because you get to meet other people, and obviously Grand Marais is a nice tight-knit community. The more you can meet when folks are coming up to Grand Marais to play from other parts of the state or the region, and making those connections with like-minded musicians that you enjoy, or even online making those connections, where you might be able to do a swap kind of situation where like they come to Grand Marais, you go back to Duluth, you share a bill. That's been something that's been useful for me, and then also it's just more fun.
I would totally agree. That's absolutely right. Networking starts with human connection. As a talent buyer, if I know the person who I'm talking to, or I have a first-hand, connection somehow, that makes all the difference in the world.
Because they're vouching for you too, or vouching for the band, right?
I get a lot of calls from people saying, "Hey, we have, a really great band, and we don't have a draw, we don't know anybody. So can we open for someone?" And the answer is no, because there's 97 guys and gals who are saying that too. And the bands who do have a draw, they're going to have somebody who they know open for them. So the best thing you can do is get in there and rub elbows. Get in
The
there.
bands directly, not just the.
Absolutely. And I used to get, when I booked a club, I booked Lee's Liquor Lounge for 5 years, and I used to get these calls from these guys, and they'd say, well, actually, this speech was given to me by Steve McClellan, who
We
said,
used to run First Avenue back in the day.
right, so Steve's legendary booking guy who invented what we know as live music in the Twin Cities. And Steve would say to me, "Why should I hire you when there's 97 guys who want that gig? And if you don't have a draw, we're not going to book you. Because I got to pay the light bill. I'm going to pay the goddamn light bill before I pay you."
That's what we would say too.
That was in his drinking days. That was a pretty good Steve McClellan. So yeah, and then that's kind of when you get this like bullet between the eyes. You finally understand. Okay, that means you have to, get out there and just meet people, and then put together some form of a bill that looks like it's interesting. It's got a story to tell, or the people that are coming are celebrating somebody's birthday, or St. Patty's Day, or whatever crazy idea you want to come up with. Even if it's just saying, hey, it's maybe it's a North Shore tour, those kinds of things make a difference. That's really it. They're ironically enough, the talent and the go, the actual music itself is secondary. If I had to listen to your demo tape, you have to have a demo tape. You have to have recordings. You have
Or
to have
digital or something.
A website.
Or
Yeah.
someplace to hear music.
Exactly. But if I had to go based on all of that, I probably wouldn't book you anyway. Because what's really important is somebody knows you, or you have a little bit of a connection locally, you know, or a story to tell that we can maybe get in the paper or make an online poster or something that says, here's what's going on, here's who they are, where they're from, where they're going.
So human connection is good. And, you know, being someone who's an artist and a promoter, you probably have seen both sides of that.
Just like you. Yeah.
Mike, was there something else you were going to ask?
Well, no, that's okay. I was also thinking about how the different types of venues that you're aiming to play at. You know, there are places that are looking to either sell tickets or charge a cover charge and like fill this space that is meant for watching a show. There are other types of venues that are like, it's a bar, it's a cafe, it's a coffee shop, there's a built-in crowd there. They have shows at 5:30 in the afternoon. When people are just kind of in there hanging out, as opposed to a place they're trying to draw people out to at 10 p.m. on a Wednesday night or whatever it happens to be. I think a lot of the groups who come through Duluth specifically, just because that's my field of experience, who maybe haven't played there before or don't have a huge draw in the area, I think they tend to have a good time when they play something like Amazing Grace Bakery, or they play for the dinner crowd at the Thirsty Peggy or whatever, as opposed to people who are knocking down the door at the Red Herring, you know, trying to get the show. Nobody really knows who they are. They might think that the venue is just going to, you know, do all the promotion for this event. Then they show up and they don't understand why nobody wants to pay $5 or $10 to come in to see them play, and they're disappointed by it. Versus people who can, you know, understand what venue might be more effective if nobody knows you yet. How can you get in front of this built-in crowd, and how can you drum up your own crowd too? That's another thing I see a lot of is sometimes people who are more experienced, who have been around a lot, have run into a lot of promoters or club owners who do a lot of the work for them, so they expect that everywhere. So you'll see people who are like veterans walk in and be confused about the fact that there's not a lot of people there, and then you'll get these young upstarts who invite all their friends to every single thing they do. They're a brand new band. They don't have that much experience, but guess what? There's 100 people here. You know, like Deidre Clark and the Social Animals when they were Diet Folk. They were in college, they were 18 years old, nobody knew who they were. I'm sitting at the brew house on a Tuesday night, and all of a sudden, I'm making money hand over fist because they brought all their friends with them, you know?
Bands like that.
Yeah, they brought everybody. So it seems obvious. It seems like, well, yeah, you're having a concert, of course you invite friends, or you get out and you invite people. It seems totally obvious, but it's not to everybody, you know? You almost have to be a little bit annoyed about it.
Which is also something interesting, because I find sometimes, in a way, my out-of-town shows, sometimes if I have like a personal network in that community, sometimes I have a bigger draw than in my hometown, only because you're playing more often in your hometown, right?
Right.
Maybe. And whereas like if you're like, oh, this is like my one show, and you probably went to way more effort, maybe. I mean, ideally you're going to effort for all your shows, but you know, if you are a busy person with other gigs, that sometimes you've hustled more, and you're like, you've given lots of notice, like, I'm coming to Duluth, I come here like once or twice a year, you know, and you've like really worked it. So that personal connection can be huge. I was gonna ask you, Nate, about one thing that I think that Mike brought up that was important is sort of thinking about what the venue is, like, and what their goals are, what the promoters' goals are out of the show, because he was talking about like coffee houses and breweries, like their goal is different than maybe what Lee's is or booking the state fair, right? Where it's like, you have a totally different goal, and how much that can play into how people should approach you. Like, should they know what you're doing and what your goals are before even asking about a gig?
Right, it's called the fit. Same the way you look for really anything. You're looking for a fit. For any given band, there's one place that they should be playing. There's one perfect club for them, you know. And like that song, the Graham Parsons song, The Good Saloon in every single town.
Yeah.
You're looking for that one good saloon. You really are looking for that one place because that's where the action's at for your music, you know. So the Social Animals, to be playing at the Mason Grace Bakery, they knew that. And that's why they could tell all their friends, you gotta come. This is gonna be it. This is the one. This is gonna be good. We're gonna have such a blast.
Yeah.
And so when they can get everybody excited, I mean, that's how they get everybody excited. So, right, that works much better than calling up and saying, this is what agents are up against. You know, agents, they have a roster of clients and they have to sell everyone as if they're the one that matters. And they have to call you, you know, random prospective talent buyer and try and shock you on somebody off this list. And, you know, that's very difficult to do because you don't know where the human connection is. You know, music isn't widgets. It's not just a matter of do you need my, you know, kind of brake fluid to fit your, you know, vending machine or whatever. It really is a social thing. So you're looking for where birds of a feather will flock together. So yeah, so like at Lee's Bar, that was all roots Americana, swing, punk, and you know, somewhere on that spectrum we could probably do it. If you're looking for a metal band, you would be over in St. Paul at the 4th Street Station. And then you find out, you know, bands and bars are political. And this was something that I didn't understand very well when I was coming in until Maggie McPherson spelled it out for me. She said, if you're going to play the Uptown Bar, then you're by God not going to play the 7th Street Entry. You have to pick your bar that you want to play. And then you go back and you play there again and again and again. If you think you're going to just hoard yourself out around town, you're not going to get very far. Nobody wants to do business who likes that. You know?
So it sounds like if you were someone like who lives up here and you're looking to play in the cities, again, the more people you know who can fill you in on the landscape, the better.
Right.
Because you don't always know going into some towns like, oh, can I play this venue? Sometimes you even ask a promoter, certainly if you know, again, if you've made connections with other musicians, they can often fill you in on like, and also just like where you can play. Like maybe if you're down for a weekend, you could play maybe one venue in the suburbs and maybe one in town, but you want to double check to make sure that depending on what kind of venue you're playing, like maybe one's a house concert and then one's like a bigger show in town at a venue, but you don't want to like hurt your audience or piss off the promoter.
Right.
So like, again, that's why those artist connections I think can be so helpful because they can fill you in on politics.
Yep, and then when you call the promoter, you say, your place is the place to play for me. This is where I really want to play. I really want to play the Turf Club. I really want to play the 331. You know, I'm just talking about our little scene. But the same way, you know, if you were trying to go to Chicago or Iowa City. I mean, wherever you're going, Duluth, everywhere you're going, there's a perfect place to play, and that's where you really want to put your eggs in that basket and tell the promoter that on the phone. If they hear that from you when you're talking to them, if you're lucky enough to talk to them, nowadays it's all email. But if you put that in there and say, we will wait until you have an opening for us because we really want to build our following at your establishment. That's like music to my ears.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's a great point, especially when you're a new emerging artist and you're going to a new place for the first time. You really want to tap into that community and find your own like hometown venue outside in another city, another place. I think that's something that's difficult for a lot of people to maybe find that perfect spot that really complements your sound. I know the project that I'm involved in, we have a 4-piece group of ladies where we have an upright bassist, a cellist, a guitarist, a vocalist, and I'm on a minimalistic set. And a lot of times the venues that we go to, they're like not quite used to hooking that up within their soundboard. They're like, oh, you don't have like an amp? You don't need like this like all of our back stuff here to like amplify your sound. So I think it's really good to know the best space for your sound, depending on what kind of instrumentation you have. And finding, maybe you have your own like spot here in Grand Marais where you're like, this is my home, this is where I feel most comfortable to create and bring your sound to life. Try to find that in another venue or in another city elsewhere. Those local connections will help you do that.
Yeah. I think also, when you do make those connections, you meet somebody who you like, you meet an owner or a booker or another musician who is professional and easy to work with, and even if you work with them one time and you go to this venue and you play a show for 5 people, if you liked that person, if they were easy to work with and they thought you were easy to work with, kind of like what you were saying, the resilience of trying to build your following in that one spot. If it went well with those 5 or 10 people or whatever, if they liked it, that's a start. That's definitely a start. And I see a lot of musicians look at the 5 or 10 people crowd and get disappointed, and I'm like, there's not no one here. You know what I mean? You're playing for somebody, and some musicians are really good about that. They're like, hey, thanks for coming. This is cool, and they put on this killer thing, and some people just kind of have this bad attitude about seeing this relatively empty room. It's like this is the game that you're playing here,
And those 5 people that if you put on a great show and you connected with them and you talked to them after the show, those 5 people will become not only hopefully will they tell their friends, but also it's a very memorable experience. If you've ever been one of those 5 people in an audience, which I have, where you're like, that was the most awesome show and I can't believe it wasn't packed, but like that's going to be what you remember is like. Especially if the band grows, and then you're like, I was at that show where there was like 5 people, and it was
and they'll come back the next time you come, and they'll bring their friends with them.
Maybe even more so than if there was a huge crowd. I mean, because you can talk to them, but there's nothing worse than if there's only 5, those 5 to 10 people. If you were kind of blew it off or acted like a jerk because you were disappointed, and I get it, we all have those days, but if you act the opposite where it's like a very negative experience, that's what they're going to remember, and they're going to tell all their friends that too. So like, I went to the show and it was really awkward because I was one of 5 people and they totally didn't want to be there, and I mean, no one wants that to be the memory of you.
Yeah.
Never totally know.
And that one person also could be a booker. I mean, another thing, which has happened a lot. I'm always amazed when someone is like, oh yeah, I saw you at that show. I'm like, really? Okay. And then they book you at another place where there's a big crowd because they promoted it really heavily.
Yeah, you never know who's listening.
I'm always way more likely to buy merch too if I'm like one of 5 or 10.
Oh yeah.
You know what I mean?
It's kind of a social.
I'm always buying CDs and shirts and stuff if it's like, because you can talk to people. You know what I mean? After the show, you can go hang out. Yeah, that's nice. So take advantage of those small crowds. If you can get booked somewhere and you have somebody show up for your performance, it's like that. If that's 5 or 10 people, you know what? That's great. Go meet some of those people. Talk to them in a room that's not super loud. You can have a conversation, and I've made a lot of good connections that way. So yeah.
So what? Does anyone have any questions? Because we could take this in all kinds of directions. Does anyone have any questions that they've been wondering about booking?
How about these 2?
Any experiences to share?
I don't have any questions. No, I'm just enjoying hearing some other perspectives. Yeah. I really do agree with the 5 or 10 people showing up thing, because we've had shows like we did a tour in Argentina for a month, just like through the whole country, and we did shows in parks because he has a pretty strong following online, some really loyal listeners. And there was one show where 2 people came. And we just said to them directly, like, hey, we're going to still give you guys our best show. And they really appreciated that because they were already, like, very loyal to his music. And they really loved that we treated them as, like, these special guests. And so I think that speaks loudly for the audience. They feel appreciated if you, treat them special.
I think it's really interesting, your personality type. My husband and I, the main band that we play in is just a duo, and my husband is extremely extroverted, just totally is energized by people. And I'm the introvert, and I'm the one that loves to be in the background unless it's 2 or 3 people, and then I'll really like, this is a good relationship. Yeah. So it's really interesting because my husband will absolutely deflate with 2 or 3 people, and I'll just be like, oh, this is the stuff. And then when the crowd comes in, I'm like, which is just silly. But it's really true, and he just comes alive. So it's a good balance. Mm-hmm. But I'm more interested. We have it's really interesting. We are really spoiled up here, just spoiled, because the crowds are for the most part they're there because it's a tourist venue, and you're always meeting new people, which is great. And some of the people that come out locally and follow you, especially your band, man, they just have a huge following locally.
Those handsome young men that I play with.
Well, that's your sound, yes. And so it is an atmosphere where you're really spoiled. So for us, just a unique situation. We have little ones at home, one of the special needs, so we never want to leave any further than we can be away from our kids. But my daughter is coming back. She's been in Belfast, so I'm actually here just learning about.
Sorry, when's she coming
Yeah,
back?
they grew up together.
Because I'm going to be here.
January.
Oh, yeah, I'll be
January, she'll be
here.
back.
Oh, great.
She has an album. These guys have a couple albums. So I'm here really not as a stage mother. She doesn't even know I'm here. But
She will now.
We're taping this whole thing.
My question for her is, she has an album that she produced herself, and it's lovely. And it's been played, here locally and played in Belfast, and she's done some things over there. So when she comes back, and maybe this is getting into the radio thing, but as she's looking at touring and looking at different things, one of her biggest drawbacks is she's a single girl alone, and she's like, gosh, this is really daunting as myself to go into this, just even playing venues, by herself in cities and stuff. So that's one challenge, and she's really good. She's got a good radar on trusting, who's trustworthy or not, but you never know. But the other thing is, do you just walk into a radio station and hand them your album and say, hey, will you play this? It works here because people know her, and the radio station's lovely up here. So I guess that's my question, is when you got your album, you're doing the thing, you've been putting your time in, she's been playing for, 3 years, locally and around in Belfast, and so now you come home, what's the next step?
Right. Well, I've got a lot of things on that for the next.
I have a few things. Yeah, I'd say the radio
the
will
next
definitely
topic.
delve more into that, but for the touring or the performing around by yourself, because I've done a lot of that, I would say there's a couple ways to navigate if she doesn't, although if she's been in Belfast playing, she probably is fairly, independent and comfortable in being in different situations. But if she, for instance, is not, there's again, that musician connection, because one thing I did a lot before I played as much with a band, and I was mainly playing solo, or I couldn't afford to bring out a band if I'm playing in, Connecticut or New York. I would, again, connections with other musicians. So I'd team up with another songwriter, singer-songwriter, maybe a coffee house show or whatever, and then that way you have someone that you know and like, and you think you're a good fit, and it helps obviously get out some audience, but also it's fun because then you have like a partner in the show, essentially. Even if you don't perform together, although again, since I play banjo and like most singer-songwriters play guitar, you already have like a second person who might be able to join you on a couple tunes, and it can make the show more interesting too, musically. So I'd say I like the teaming up to do shows on a lot of levels, but I think especially if you're touring solo, then you have people to play with, even if they're not playing on the whole tour. If you have some of those in a bunch of different towns, like friends in different towns, then you can, or maybe you even ask the promoter, if say you don't know someone in that town, maybe you ask the promoter, hey, is there another local that would be a good fit with my music? And they often like that because then you're getting to meet the people.
Yeah.
Does she play Celtic music?
Yeah. Well, she did with our little band back here, but she plays kind of folksy, bluesy kind of stuff is really what she plays.
The reason I ask is, again, just looking for that fit.
Yeah.
Within Irish music, Celtic, there is a huge net out there.
Yeah.
And all kinds
Especially
of clubs,
during
top
St.
houses,
Patrick's
clubs.
Day.
St. Patty's Day, everybody gets together.
But I would
You've got a
say,
story to tell.
Yeah.
That's still interesting.
Yeah.
Michelle,
And the beauty about sorry.
I was just
One
going to say,
moment.
Maria, she hasn't traveled in the Midwest much for her music yet, has she?
No, she's been in Ireland for 3 years. She's been in Ireland, so she hasn't done any touring back here. She's just played the shore.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I could probably help connect her with some people that I know in various places around the so, yeah.
And I was gonna say, I
Tour
mean,
with them.
Perfect.
yes, I was like,
We're not going to be on tour for a while, probably not until next August and September.
but I would also
They live-
say,
her parents live up the road from us, so
Okay.
they grew up together.
well, and I would also say that, like, for instance, you and I are meeting now, and I do a folk Americana thing, so I'd be interested in hearing what your daughter does. So, I mean,
So
there
it's
might
just
be a-
connections.
yeah.
And, you know, that's really how she wound up getting gigs in Belfast, was just meeting people, meeting other musicians, and suddenly it's just like doors just open.
And the
You know,
nice thing with social media now is that it gives you another avenue to at
Right.
least connect with people. Like if you're like going to a place you've never been, you can at least, if you at least have one connection, or you can like then listen to stuff online, like, oh, this band plays a lot at this venue.
Right.
Oh, and they do something similar. Like you can make some of those connections virtually as well.
Yeah, embrace the intimacy of that, of having just one person. You know, find small, intimate venues that complement that sound. And the cool thing about a solo act is that you can really go anywhere. You know, you
Yeah,
can go to a park,
it's cheap.
you can go. Yeah, I mean, there's the network there is just it's great. So yeah, live
And
in
I'd
the
also
show.
say there's a lot of venues that are available to singer-songwriters that, although there's some venues that don't work for solo acts, there are some venues, there's a lot more kinds of venues that solo acts can do, from, you know, house concerts to coffee shops, to
Brunch.
breweries, to,
Really brunch.
yeah, you can do daytime gigs, there's sometimes school stuff, I mean, there's so many different, you know, farmers markets. There's a lot of types of venues, whereas like if you're playing in a big punk band, you can't play the coffee shops or some of those, you know, quieter venues, so that wineries, I mean, there's a lot of kinds of stuff. So, but we're gonna dive more into the rave stuff in a little bit for sure. Any other questions?
The topic last year, whatever, I don't remember what it was now, but it was.
When we were in Ely?
We were talking to Rich Mattson and Jermaine Gemler from Rich Mattson and the North Stars, and the topic went this direction, and I just want to share something that he said because I thought it was really poignant. He was like, you know, he said you have to know why you're out there, and remember what it is that you're hoping to get out of this. You know what I mean? Like people tend to forget sometimes. You know, it gets a little bit lost on them. It's like you got to remember why you're out there. If the attitude later is going to be that this was a chore and that it was just a long drive for us or whatever, you know, then if that's how you feel about it, then I don't even want to do it. You know, because we're not. He's like, I'm not. I want to play the show. I'm not expecting to get like a huge payday out of this, but like I want to do it. It's fun. You know what I mean? And so yeah, to hear him say that, just remember why you're out there and don't think of it as a chore, and just having a good attitude. Again, another thing that seems totally obvious, but when it's late at night, like at the Herring, and it's maybe a Wednesday or something, and there's not that many people there, there's seriously nothing cooler than seeing a musician like look around at those 5 people and be like, well,
I'm gonna almost.
you know what I mean? And they just like totally blow the doors off the place. Like it's the coolest thing. It's the coolest thing that you can see.
I think the why question, that's something, it's funny that you say that, because I've been thinking about that a lot in the last year in general, about a lot of different things I've been doing, including my music, is thinking about, just in general, always asking myself why. Because sometimes there's an assumption, you're like, oh, well, I play music, therefore the next thing I should do is tour. And it's not always touring. I mean, again, if you have a sweet situation, I'm not saying one way or the other, but you know, there are plenty of bands that make their living just playing, depending if they have a vibrant enough music scene. They might make their full-time living doing it or part-time, and they're really happy doing that, you know. But then there's sometimes people who are like, no, I want to get out there on the road because I want to visit new places, and I want to meet other bands, or I really care about bringing my songs to new people, or I love engaging with audiences, or, you know, like why? Why are you doing what you're doing?
The goal has changed at that point.
Right, and they might change at various points throughout, so you have to keep asking yourself why. Like, why am I... But just assuming that you should do something just because you're a musician or performer, like, oh, I should put out vinyl, because a lot of people are putting on vinyl. Well, maybe, but...
Let's do some cassettes.
It's really expensive, so, you know, thinking about, like, why are you... I don't know. Just, I would advise to always ask yourself why. And if you have a good answer, then that's good. And the answer could be really simple, like, it's fun. Or, or I'm there to make money, whatever those things, or a combination of those things.
Yeah, I had like
Yep.
a comment on that and a question. I started actually working like full time kind of as a musician at 15,
Mhm.
and I moved out of home pretty soon, so I could do that all the time, and I was really kind of proud against having like a side hustle, anything that would make money on the side. I was super against I would maintain my ramen diet just so I wouldn't need another job that would distract me from music.
Out of pride.
Yeah, just out of pride. And it took me like on the last year or so, for example, we just finished a 5-month tour, and we're not gonna tour for a few months.
We really
And
haven't even been home yet. We just arrived today.
yeah, we just finished the last
This
show
is
yesterday.
really good timing.
And it was really kind of eye-opening for me, discovering about last year that in the months that we're not touring or something like that, or like at the time that I'm going to be recording my next album, just concentrate on side things that make money shouldn't be at all like embarrassing,
Mhm.
which was something that a lot of musicians still have, and I had it for a long time.
Mhm.
And the actual question was completely different, which is in the Twin Cities and Duluth, how do you think in the music scene, the live music scene for new bands has changed in the last few years? What would you?
For the last 20 years.
Whoa,
Well,
yeah.
social media has
Nate
changed
could
a
give
lot.
a whole take on that, I bet, right?
When I came to town in the Twin Cities, it was 1983, and it was a rock and roll mecca. And I didn't know that until I got here. And I was like fresh off the turnip truck.
What genre do you play?
When I came to town, I was playing in I think we were a dance rock band, you'd call it. We were gonna be the next Duran Duran or something. We had haircuts, and we were gonna try and get signed by a national label, and that was our big objective. I mean, we had a lawyer, we had insurance, we had all this. Yeah, it was like a super professional band. And, it was awfully great. and after a year and a half of that, I realized I just wanted to play music. So I discovered the area was a terrific area for venues. There was all kinds of music happening in the Twin Cities and in Minnesota. I mean, I came from East Tennessee, where if you want to play music, if it's not bluegrass, good luck. And then you'll get your hat handed to you. Even in what was called Music City in Nashville, it was not Music City. There's more music going on here in a random square mile of the Twin Cities than there was in all of Nashville. Nashville was an industry town in the same sense that Detroit is an industry town for making cars. If you want to make, design the headlamp on a car, you maybe would go to Detroit. But if you want to be in a car club and talk about cars, you go to Pomona. Well, that's what